Good morning, Jesse.
Good morning.
We're here for episode 3 of the Resilience Zone. I'm very excited. How about you?
Yes, me too. We get to talk about a couple more skills today, so that's always fun.
Excellent. So let's remind them. I'm Paul Smokowski. I'm Director of Research Development and Community Impact at the North Carolina Youth Violence Prevention Center. And you?
Thanks. I'm Jessie Hardin. I work at Carolina Complete Health Network. I get to do our education and training and also am a community resiliency model trainer.
Great. And I'm very happy to present with Jesse. And let's bring everybody up to speed on what we talked about in Resilience Zone 1 and 2. So Jesse, what is this Resilience Zone?
Yeah, so I think it's always good to level set and remind everybody about this thing called the resilience zone. We talked about it in episode 1 quite a bit, but it is something that is important no matter which part of CRIM you're hearing or which skill you're practicing. And this resilience zone is really where we feel balanced in our mind, our body, and our spirit. Some people call it the zone of well-being or the okay zone. It's just when you're able to go about your day and you could still feel a full range of emotions in your resilient zone, but not swept away by anything too extreme. But we are all human, right? And so sometimes we do get bumped out of that resilient zone because of something stressful or traumatic. And it could be happening to us or even to someone around us or in our environment. And our nervous system and our brains, as we learned about in episode 2, respond in a way to keep us safe. Now, the thing is sometimes our nervous systems and our brains respond to things that they perceive as dangerous, but may not be, right? For example, if my phone starts ringing and I'm not expecting a phone call, I might suddenly get a little nervous about that. So that's just the way our brains and bodies are designed. It is really all about biology. If you look at that top line on the slide here, it's about biology, not mental weakness. So if you feel yourself getting bumped out, it's not because you're weak and can't handle something, but it's just the way our bodies are designed. And so CRIM teaches us basically how to feel and notice when we're in our resilient zone and when we get bumped out so that we can use some of these CRIM skills, as you see on the right side, to help us get back into that zone of well-being.
That's great. And so sometimes these events can make us anxious, make us depressed, like the lower part of the zone. And the CRIM skills are kind of a toolbox for us to be able to respond in the moment and to be aware of all these different emotions that we might have. Am I on
Yeah,
track?
exactly. Yep.
Great.
And the thing about our emotions too is that basically every emotion or feeling can be tied to some kind of physical sensation or cue in the body. If I'm feeling nervous, I might feel, butterflies in my stomach, or my heart might be beating a little bit faster. And so these are things that we're going to pay attention to. And we do that through a skill called tracking. So we introduced that in the last episode, but I wanted to review that again today because it is, as you see on that graphic, it's central to all of our other skills. So on the next slide, I just will recap what tracking is really quickly. And essentially, it's paying attention to your nervous system, paying attention to what's going on inside that body of yours. And noticing what is pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. So a moment ago, I said, if I feel nervous, my heart might beat a little bit faster, and that could be unpleasant. But if I'm happy or excited and I notice my heart beating faster, that could actually be pleasant. And so it's important to ask those questions and then really giving us choice and power as to what we pay attention to.
Absolutely. Sometimes my team of mental health therapists talk about uh, our clients taking their emotional temperature. So, and that might be something, I'm hot, I'm angry, or I'm, feeling disconnected or isolated and feeling cold. So, and that can help because it makes us more aware of where our feelings are and their intensity in our bodies.
Exactly. I love that that concept of it's like your emotional temperature. It's just checking in and being that thermometer for where you are in that moment. Where are you in your resilience zone? All right, so on the next slide, we'll give a couple more examples of how you can read or track these physical sensations. We've mentioned a few of them already, but just first through observations, you can tell with yourself or someone else if their body posture changes or they get suddenly really tense, or maybe their breathing changes, or maybe their skin color is changing. That might be an indication that something's going on internally. Their climate inside, that temperature is changing. May not be unpleasant, may be pleasant, but something's going on. And so you can sort of notice those things while just engaging or talking with another person.
This is a
And then,
really important point. I'm sorry,
yeah,
Jesse, but
go
yeah,
ahead.
we may be within our resilience zone, but other people that I'm talking with may be outside of their resilience zone for one reason or another. So being able to spot that in another, let's say a loved one, let's say your spouse, is really helpful in our daily interactions.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you pointed that out because, a lot of us are interacting with people all throughout the day, whether it's virtually or in person. And even through your computer camera, you can even track some individuals too. You can track through our webcams if you are meeting virtually still, but definitely in person as well. And it's nice to be in tune and aware of that because learning these crim skills, it's really easy to share them in your everyday life and help other people also get back to their resilience zone too. So how about we jump into another concept here. We're talking about neuroplasticity. So I'll get to that in just a moment, but it's really this concept of where our attention goes, energy flows. So in our brains, we have all these billions of neurons, they're firing and wiring, and they're communicating to each other. If we're paying attention to these more pleasant or neutral sensations, our brain is going to kind of light up around that. And it's called neuroplasticity. And if you look at the word plastic is inside of the word neuroplasticity. And if you think about plastic, it can be molded, it can be changed, it can be put into a totally different shape. And the great thing is our brains, we can sort of rewire the way it communicates. And a really easy example of this is, for instance, if you are learning a new skill or a new language, or if you're learning to play a new sport or instrument, right out of the gate, you may not be super great at it. But with practice and practice and practice, those neurons are firing, they're remembering, they're making that connection faster. But use it or lose it principle applies too. If we learned a language when we were, 15 in high school, but then we didn't continue it and 20 years later ask that person if they could speak some of that language, chances are that it's going to be a little bit bumpy. They may not be able to. And that's because we really haven't paid attention to those skills and we haven't practiced or focused our energy or attention to that.
I think this is
So, yeah.
a really important area because so much of our research is around infancy, childhood, even adolescence. And when I work with adults, they often think, well, I'm kind of fixed, I am who I am. And that is just not, that's kind of an older concept that really isn't so with the idea of neuroplasticity across life as we learn and grow and change. It's much more dynamic than who you are is fixed after adolescence.
Absolutely. You can always learn new things and practice new skills, and over time, it becomes easier, no matter how old you are.
Right.
And so, an easy way to remember this is this quote here: brain cells that fire together wire together, on the next slide. It's just an easy way to remember how, if we sort of practice new skills, those neurons and brain cells that are there to communicate and practice, the more we do that, the more they're going to fire and wire together.
And in relationship too, Jesse, as if you're in sync with another person, then our connections actually strengthen and wire as a dyad, as a couple, for example.
Yeah, it is pretty amazing how our brains can communicate wirelessly. And going back to our example of if you're in your zone, but you're interacting with somebody who may be bumped out, just you being in your resilient zone and regulated actually can help that person come back into their resilient zone without even doing much at all because of this mirror neurons concept. And I think that's pretty fascinating the way our brains can talk to one another.
Absolutely. And that is, I think, even more reason to be aware or to track your own where you are,
Mhm.
because we often mirror those who are around us. So
Yep.
understanding if it's me, I'm out of my zone, or if it's because I'm kind of wired in mirroring Jesse's anxiety, for example.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
really
and
important.
and and it's an important concept for people who may be in professions where they are taking care of others, or there may be a therapist, for example, and they are hearing maybe stories of trauma or stress from the members and clients they work with. That person's brain can almost adapt as though it's happening to them and respond with stress. And so it is really, really important on so many levels. So let's go into another skill. The second skill of CRIM we teach is called resourcing. And the reason we teach this one so upfront next to tracking is because it's really going to help you, one, get that felt sense of when you come back into your resilient zone and what that physically feels like. And it's also really, really effective at helping lay down those new neural pathways in our brain so that those neurons start firing and wiring together. So, what is a resource? Basically, it is something that you can think about or call to memory that helps you feel better in the moment. It just kind of turns down the volume of the stress around you. It could be something that you enjoy doing, like a hobby. It could be a person or a place that you visited, or a thing, or a song, or an activity. There's really no limits to what can be a resource as long as it helps you calm down and feel better in the moment when you think about it. Now, sometimes resources can have different natures, and sometimes a resource doesn't actually make us feel better in the moment. So it's important to think about it on the other side as well, and then shift to a different resource or a different skill.
That's, I think, a key idea that you just said, Jesse, because in some of our clients who have had a traumatic stress, they remember what was stressful. And with post-traumatic stress, they keep going back to that moment. And that is
Mhm.
the reverse of this. What we're hoping with the resourcing skill is that we can engender a pleasant, a helpful, a growthful um, either memory or resource. And then you can, when there's stress, you can go to that. For example, I often have my clients think of a safe and nurturing place in their mind. It could be a real place, or it can be just an imagined place. And then they have the capacity to go there to that image when they are stressed.
Exactly. And then with CRIM, if we pull the tracking piece into it, it's really that person paying attention to any signs that they are feeling a little bit better. For example, when they think about that place in their mind, did their breath rate change? Did their muscles relax? Did their heart rate come back down? And those are the things that when we pay attention to, it's going to signal to our brains and bodies, okay, we're okay. And then that sense of resiliency is really going to expand.
Exactly. I want to throw in, often we talk about breathing as well. And the breathing is along with the imagined um, image that can bring down the stress level into more relaxation.
Yeah, with CRIM, we definitely use breathing as a physical sensation that you pay attention to. We're really careful with this model not to be prescriptive and tell someone to take a deep breath because we don't know if that would be pleasant or not for that person. And so if they can pay attention to their breathing and then tell us or tell themselves, okay, is this pleasant or neutral or unpleasant? then they get that choice back. So next we'll talk about how to intensify any resource that you call to mind. So say, for example, you're thinking of a place that you really like to visit, or maybe you've never been there, but the idea of visiting is great for you. Well, think about that and then add a few more details. So what that does is it really helps our brain kind of lock down into that resource and really carve out that new neural pathway in our brain. And so, Paul, I would invite you. What is a resource for you? If you would like to share, please do.
Well, I love mountains. So as you're talking, I'm thinking of, and I also love photographs. So I'm thinking of an image photograph of the Himalayan mountains.
Mhm. Have you ever been there?
No.
That's pretty amazing. I imagine you probably would love to visit there one day.
Sometime. So how
Yeah.
would I do resource intensification with just kind of an image of my mind?
Yeah, so take a moment and just think about that picture of the Himalayan mountains, and then maybe you picture yourself there, and then look around you. What do you see in your mind? Do you see the colors of the mountains? Do you see the color of the sky or the earth underneath you? Really just picturing the whole scene and what it might feel like to be standing there in that environment.
It's almost like these virtual reality goggles that you can put on, but in our
It
minds,
is.
we have control over that, don't we? So
Yes.
I just have to be intentional about not just looking at this picture, but maybe seeing myself there, feeling
Mhm.
the wind, or what do I smell in the Himalayan mountains?
Yeah, exactly. I love that you brought in feeling the wind or breeze around you. That is a great way to intensify that resource. So next up, we're just going to flash this activity. So if you're watching this, you can pause the screen and maybe give yourself a moment to actually write down a few resources. It's one thing to sort of have them in your mind, but another thing as you learn a skill is it's helpful to write it down. So what you would do is you would write down 3 or more resources that come to mind for you. Then you would circle one of them and practice adding additional details to that. And then as you write, just pay attention through that skill of tracking what you notice on the inside. What do you notice with your nervous system? Did you notice a change in temperature in your skin? Did you notice that your breath rate changed or that your muscles relaxed? Anything along those lines that help you feel a bit more calm and in control. Those are good signs that this is a strong resource and can help you get back into your resilient zone. And then the next time you practice this, you'll notice that those pleasant or neutral sensations, they can occur a lot faster because our brain is used to calling to mind a resource to help us feel better.
You can really do this exercise anywhere. Sometimes if
Mhm.
I'm frustrated or anxious at the bank, waiting for my turn, I can do this in my mind. But I
Yeah.
do really recommend often the writing it down. You're actually seeing it. You're physically writing the words, and then your mind is processing what you've written. So it's multiple kind of exposure, and it really intensifies the focus, taking our mind away from some of these anxious thoughts into the resources that you're writing about.
Yeah, exactly. I love that idea. Writing it down. A lot of people, practice journaling or gratitude journaling, for example, or affirmations. And those are all more examples of resources. And just like you said, the act of writing it down helps put it into our brains even stronger.
Absolutely, and gratitude journals is good research on that, and how it can increase our positive psychology, our sense
Yeah.
of gratitude, our sense of hope, and decrease some of the anxiety that we might be feeling.
Absolutely. I learned once that oftentimes people think that happy people are grateful people, but it's actually the opposite. Grateful people are happy. So the gratitude is the action to feel that happiness.
And I think
So
that's a wonderful note to end on, Jesse. I think this is our last slide. Is that right?
We have one more,
We had
but
one more.
we could definitely save this.
No, I think while we're on it, why don't we do it?
Okay, good. So one more quick skill I like to introduce earlier on is it's called help now or reset now. And what that means is something that can help you rather quickly. And there are some examples on the slide here. And you'll notice that some of them are physical in nature, like going for a walk or pushing against a wall, or others are relying on other senses in the body. What do we hear? What do we smell? What do we see? And so if you're in a situation where you really get bumped out pretty quickly, either high or low, you can use a quick help now or reset now skill to get you back closer to that resilient zone. We talked about the brain a little bit in episode 2 and how when we are experiencing stress or trauma, that part of our brain that helps us think and make decisions, it goes offline because other parts of our brain are firing that we need to get to safety, run, or fight. And so it can be hard in those moments to actually think about a resource like we just did because it does require more of that thinking part of the brain. And so help now, reset now, it sort of bypasses that. It helps get us there quicker. And it's really, really helpful if you're feeling bumped low or bumped high to kind of give you that jolt you need to get closer to that resilient zone. And then you can quickly shift to other skills to help you even more in that moment. And with help now too, you can fit these types of cues into your conversations with other people. So on the next slide, we give some examples of how this may sound. You know, earlier we introduced that concept of you can help somebody else get back into their resilient zone just by learning and practicing the skills for your own self first. And so when you're talking with someone and you notice that they may be getting bumped out because you're really good at tracking and you're picking up that maybe their posture changed or they got tense in that moment, you might suggest, hey, would it be helpful if we go for a walk together? Or can I get you a drink of water? Or maybe kind of turning it back on you and saying, sometimes when I'm not feeling my best, it's helpful to remember a time in my life where the moment was better. And that's resourcing right there. And so it's kind of inviting somebody into that activity with you without it feeling very formal and really just part of your conversation.
I think that's a great idea because one of the biggest resources are social support, some of the people around us who we enjoy being with. And this exercise is actually doing it together. Whether one person or both are out of their resilient zones, you can come back to sort of your co-created resilient zone.
Absolutely. And this will be a little quiz for anybody who watched the very first episode, but we introduced the definition of resiliency according to one of the co-founders of this model. And one of the things that she writes in that definition is it's about our collective strengths as well. And so using skills with another person helps them get back into their zone, helps you stay in yours, and it's just collective strengths working together to help create a more resilient atmosphere. And on that note, this is our last slide.
Okay, I'm glad we added that little last piece. And these are some great skills to be able to practice and have in our toolbox when under times of stress. But when we're calm and in our zone, I think that's the best time to develop these. And then when we do get bummed out, we'll remember, oh, I need to take a walk. I need to, have that coffee that just kind of helps me get centered.
Absolutely. That's why it's so important, you know, going back to our resilient zone, it's really key to recognize when you are in your zone and use that as an opportunity to practice some of these skills. It'll be a lot easier to learn them and practice them when you are already in your zone.
Well, thank you for being with me today, Jesse. And this is great material. And I look forward to our next episode coming up of Your Resilience Zone.
Thanks. Always good to be here.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hold on one second, Jesse, because I know here I'm